Well, hello everyone. Good evening. We hope you're all doing well today. Um, First and foremost, we want to thank you for coming to today's webinar. But before we get started with the content that we have for today, we just want to make sure that we remind you to make sure your mic and your cameras are turned off. And if you have any questions, please direct them to Martha in the chat. There should be an option to send your questions privately to Martha, so make sure that you direct them there. And we will get to those questions towards the end of the webinar. Also, this session will be available on our YouTube channel, so feel free to head over there if there are certain things that you might have missed or that you want to go back over from this webinar. But other than that, thank you for coming today, and let's get started. So today's webinar, we'll be talking about the application process for undergraduate admissions, and we'll be talking about the different application services there are, as well as some of the different components that are part of this process as well. Next slide, please. So as we get into this, myself, Jack, and Megan would like to introduce ourselves. So my name is Manny. I am a rising sophomore at the University of Chicago this fall. I am one of the EducationUSA interns interning at the Mexico City Center. Yeah, I'll pass it along to Jack.
Hi, I'm Jack. I am a rising third year at the University of Chicago. I too am an intern at EducationUSA in Mexico City, though of course we are remote currently. Megan?
Megan, we cannot hear you. You can unmute yourself, please.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. My name is Megan. I'm also an intern from the University of Chicago. I am actually an intern for the office in Guadalajara, and I'm a rising junior.
All right, thank you, Jack and Megan. We hope that a lot of the information that we'll give today is pretty helpful. But before we do jump into more of the content, we just want to kind of acquaint you with what EducationUSA is. And EducationUSA is a network of advising centers, and these advising centers, there are more than 400 of them in more than 175 countries and different territories. And all of these are supported by the Department of State in the United States. And EducationUSA's goal is to offer information and also to advise students about the various opportunities to study at post-secondary institutions in the United States. Currently, due to a lot of the aftermath and conditions regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, EducationUSA is operating 100% virtually, but we are hosting a variety of different webinars and events, and we're still offering one-on-one advising sessions. So please make sure to be on the lookout for some of those. In Mexico, there are 26 advising centers throughout the country. And if you would like to find the advising center that's closest and most convenient for you, all you have to do is go to educationusa.state.gov. And if you go to find an advising center and you put in your location, you'll be able to find the advising center closest to you. So again, make sure to visit educationusa.state.gov to find that closest advising center. But now that we have introduced a bit of Education USA as well as ourselves, we'll be talking about the different applications that are available for students to apply to colleges and universities. Just a quick note again, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please make sure to direct those to Martha in the chat. Yes, let's get started. So the first application, or at least the first suite of tools for applying that we like to talk about is the MyCoalition Toolkit. This is, it specifically contains the coalition application. And this application is part of the toolkit that is designed by the Coalition for College Access, Affordability, and Success. And this is all designed to help lower income or under-resourced or first-generation students to learn about, prepare for, and apply to college. There are 168 member colleges and universities that currently accept the coalition application. And all of the tools in this toolkit are free to use for students, families, and any other individuals that are a part of the application process for a student. There are also three major components of this toolkit, which are the virtual locker, the collaboration space, and the application portal. Next slide, please. One of the most important things to consider are the benefits of using the coalition application and the tools that go along with it. One of these is the ability to start early and to stress less. By encouraging students to start thinking about and working towards college early, this process becomes much easier when the time comes to apply. And again, the tools in the MyCoalition toolkit are also free to access. So application fees for different schools once you finish the application may vary depending on which schools the students apply to, but the process of entering information and creating a profile and all of those things are free to access for students. There's more available aid that is possible to be granted for students. There are application fee waivers that the coalition toolkit provides for students, and it allows them to seek different aid for application fees and other costs associated with applying for college. There are also the quality of schools. The MyCoalition toolkit is designed to help students to think carefully and strategically about the decisions they'll make in terms of applying for these schools and all of the activities they'll engage in before application season rolls around. And a lot of the schools that participate in this coalition application are very robust and very well regarded universities and colleges that will offer good education for students applying. Lastly, there are unlimited applications. Although there are a small handful of member colleges and universities that accept this application, any student that uses the application is able to apply to as many of the member universities and colleges as they'd like to that do accept it. But now that we've talked a little bit about some of the basics, I'd like to hand it over to Jack to talk about the different parts of the toolkit.
Yeah, so the MyCoalition toolkit, as he mentioned, has three parts: the virtual locker, the collaboration space, and the application portal. I think we're going to go through these one by one. Could I get the next slide? Yeah, so starting with the locker tool. This is a cloud-based storage space where students can keep important documents that might be helpful in their college application process. These can include essays, transcripts, recommendation letters, multimedia presentations or projects, art portfolios, musical portfolios, application essay drafts, really, anything that you think might be helpful for students to, for a student's application. Yeah, sorry, one moment. It allows students to start saving their important information fairly early, which can be helpful when the confusion and stress of the application process comes in, to have these tools at hand and not have to look for them. Could I get the next slide, please? Thank you. The collaborative space, it relates to the locker closely. It allows a number of people to administer feedback on a student's application or documents or essays. It, I think, primarily is used by family members, teachers, counselors, etc., but it can be used by any number of people that anyone thinks might be a valuable collaborator in the application process. Everyone from employers to faith leaders to coaches. It is a very helpful tool for people who want to get another their application. Could I get the next slide, please? So, I mean, most significantly probably, and most obviously, you have the application portal, which is where you build your profile, write your essays, search schools, see what information the schools want and apply to those schools. Yeah, this is probably one of the longer, more time-consuming elements. Of course, I would recommend to anyone considering the college application process to take plenty of time on the actual application portal, because it will ask for a lot of information to create your profile. This will be everything from your background and your parents' careers to where you live and what your extracurriculars are. You will also do your writing through the portal. I mean, you can work on it in the collaborative space in the locker, but it will give prompts there, both for we'll talk more about this, but for both the essays that will be sent to all schools and the supplemental essays. Yeah, and you can make your application and your profile and then search among the coalition colleges and apply through that. Colleges will often ask specific information, so you might have to fill out more information there. Next slide, please. So writing. There's writing for both the coalition and the common application and all applications that we're talking about. Expect to be writing a personal statement, which is a short essay. It's not a resume or a brag sheet or an analytical essay. It's about you and about your story. Write about what motivates you. Talk about yourself, which can be difficult for some people. You're not really trained to do that academically as much. But just try and tell a story about yourself or tell something about yourself in a way that you think would help application counselors and admissions officers, help get to know you. There's also the coalition essay, which is 500 to 550 words. It also focuses on you and your story and experiences. There are 5 prompts from which, you can go for this. The sort of suggested ones are: tell a story from your life, describe a time when you made a meaningful contribution to others. Has there been a time when you've had a long cherished or accepted belief challenged, and what is the hardest part of being a student? But there's also submit an essay on a topic of your choice. So those prompts are really more suggestions of the kind of thing they want. If you really have a story about yourself that that doesn't fit into one of those first 4, you still think fits into the essay process, I think you could generally do it, though you would want to be sure that it actually works. Like, you don't want to just submit like a 500-word essay about a book you read in high school. You want to have something that tells a story about yourself and shows what kind of person you're going to be at that. Supplemental essays. Supplemental essays are the essays that specific schools ask you to write and only go to that specific school. They can take a number of forms. Some schools simply ask, why do you want to go to this school? Some schools will ask, sort of like clever questions that try and get to know you a bit better. I know that, for example, I know that Carleton College, has like a 150-word essay of like, Carleton College is powered largely by solar power. What empowers you? And you write a bit about that. Essay writing, I think, is extremely important because colleges, especially nowadays, don't want to accept a resume. There's really just a lot of qualified people out there. They want to accept a person who will engage in the community in a useful way that will build that community up. And an essay is, you can, sort of advertise yourself to some degree. Say like, listen, here's what I would bring to this community. Here is, the type of person I would be and the things I'd be interested in and why I want to go to this university. And that can be very powerful and helpful for your application. I'll also mention that our next webinar on the 20th at 5, can somebody correct me if that's wrong in the chat? It will be given by Megan, and it will be about the essay writing process in more detail. So I would recommend you show up to that. Yeah, I'll very quickly mention that I credit the essay writing process for why I got into the University of Chicago. I don't think I would have if it had just been resumes. It can be a very powerful tool for the university to sort of get to know you better. Can I get the next slide? Thank you. There are also tools that aren't really a central element of the toolkit, but that can better there to help you with the other elements. It has a directory of resources and articles that can help you out. And there's also a help tab that gives, advice and directions on things. Yeah. It's it's just there if you are stuck and need some help. Last for me, and then I'll hand it to Megan, I believe. To submit your application, follow the instructions on the application status page. Be sure to, carry it through to the end. Make sure that you get confirmation emails that you applied and such. You certainly don't want to go through all the effort of applying to a school you like and then realize that you forgot to click something. Also, some schools will have an external confirmation process. It normally isn't a big deal, but for example, I know the University of North Carolina accepts other applications, but it makes you make a University of North Carolina account and just tells you like, okay, we received your application. So make sure that everything is submitted and, get all the confirmations and such. I will hand it to Megan now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jack. Briefly, we're going to talk about the Common Application. So similar to the Coalition application, the Common Application is another popular choice amongst students for applying to undergraduate institutions in the United States. And so this platform is designed to allow you to apply to multiple schools at one time. It is free. The physical platform is free to use for students, but you will have to pay a fee if you're going to send the application to different schools, and that fee is dependent upon each school. I also think that, or not also think, also there's something called the fee waiver. So if you want to, maybe you can't pay these fees, or you want to see if you are eligible to be waived to paying these fees, all you have to do is fill out the Common Application fee waiver. And so this will allow you to be waived of paying any application fees for all the schools that you apply to. So definitely keep that in mind when you're applying. Some helpful and important benefits of the Common Application is that it helps you save time, just like the Coalition application. Because you get to apply to multiple universities at the same time, you're only inputting that general information once, doing that general essay once, so that helps you save time, and it also helps you stay on track. So a little later in the session, we'll talk about the importance of deadlines, but what the Common Application does is it allows you to know the school's potential, or the deadlines and requirements for those schools. And so it allows you in one platform to keep track of all that. So that's a really important aspect of the Common Application. And it allows you to kind of gauge where you need to put your time and how you're going to use it wisely. As I said, keeping in mind that fee waiver, if you want to pay attention to that so you can apply for that, see if you are eligible. Several things on the Common Application are very important for the Common Application. One thing is the activities. So this is any clubs, organizations, or teams that you were involved with or participated in your high school, but also outside of your high school. So you can provide up to 10 activities, and make sure you choose ones that give more of a complete idea and generalization of who you are. And this is an area where you get to present the person you are to these universities by telling them what activities and interests you have, and like what you were involved with during your time in high school, that whether those were clubs and activities in high school or outside of high school, just making sure that it's important to pick ones that showcase who you are in the best light. And so one thing that is important with this is you're going to be given 150 characters to sum up what each of these activities were. So don't make this boring. Try and make these stand out and show why these were important to you. So just keeping that in mind and being aware that you will have an opportunity to share these activities. The Coalition application also provides an area where you can showcase these activities. And so for the Coalition application, you are asked to pick your top 2 that you were involved with, but then it'll allow you to provide 8 more, or 8 in total. Another thing with the Common Application is the optional essays. So some of the schools that you apply to will have optional essays for you to write potentially if you would like to. While these are listed as optional, we recommend that you do them because it's an opportunity on the application to go into a bit more detail about yourself and why you're interested in going to that college. Maybe something about overcoming difficulty, important moments in your life, but really showcasing yourself and giving the college the best or giving yourself the best opportunity to be accepted into that university. And it really shows that if you do the optional essay, it kind of shows these colleges that you're really interested. You put the time and effort into doing an essay that wasn't even required for the application. So we recommend that you try and look at those and try and do them. And we know that these can take a little bit of time and energy, but it's important to show these colleges that you are interested in, that you want to go there, and that these places are a great fit for you. Another thing, kind of like with the Coalition application, are the supplemental essays. So some colleges and universities will require you to write supplemental essays or short answer responses. And so more often they tend to be like more school specific essays. So it'll be like, why do you want to come to our university? So just making sure that you are paying attention to each university and really giving the time and effort and putting that into those essays and making it individualistic for each university that you apply to, so you can show why you would be a great fit and why you want to go to that institution. and just give everything you got, because these essays are a really important thing when you're applying to college, because it really showcases yourself and gives the universities and institutions a bit more information about yourself and why you would be a good fit for their college. And just like the coalition application, once you're ready to submit, there are it's a simple 3-step process. So you just review your application, all the information, the essays, and making sure that everything's as you want it to, paying the application fee unless you did get that fee waived, and then submitting and hitting the submit button. But yeah, so that's really it on the common application. I'm going to hand it over to Manny so he can tell us a little bit more application processes that are offered for applying to undergraduate institutions in the US.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you for sharing a bit about the Common App there. And if anybody is interested in learning a bit more in depth about the Common Application, there is a video of a past webinar about the Common App on YouTube. So feel free to search for that as well. But now we are heading into a few of the other applications that are out there. There are certain applications that are specific to certain regions or states in the US. Apply Texas is one of these. This is a application that is only for schools in Texas, and there are over 50 participating schools in Texas for this application. And some of these are public schools, some of these are private institutions, and some of these are community colleges. While not necessarily every school in Texas may participate, a good number of the ones that students usually apply to participate in this program. And if you're interested in any of those schools or applying for colleges in Texas specifically, this is a very helpful application for you as well. This is also very similar with the University of California Public Schools application. Similar to Apply Texas, it is only for the UC schools, the University of California Public Schools, and that includes all 9 of them, including ones like UCLA. If you're interested in applying to schools affiliated with this collection of University of California Public Schools, this is a very good application for you to consider as well. And then finally, there's also individual applications that each school has for themselves. And although this option is definitely offered, it is highly recommended that you use a central application service like the Common App or the Coalition app, because each school having their own application does mean that you will probably more than likely have to input all of your personal information into each one of these individual applications. And that can be very time consuming. And these central application services like the Common application or the Coalition application streamlines that process like we've been talking about, to where you'll be able to put in your personal information and certain other things such as essays or other activities or other important information that schools will need, and they will carry over to each school that you apply to. And the only thing that you will end up having to do is to write the specific essays for each school. So using central applications will save you a lot more time and streamline your process. Next slide, please. So now that we've talked a little bit about the different application services or different types of applications out there, we want to segue into some of the different deadlines or application types. And so we have covered these a little bit in the Instagram Live that we do every Wednesday. If you'd like to, you can go to the EducationUSA Mexico Instagram page, and you can check out our Instagram Live series there. But we want to make sure we recap just a little bit here and talk about those application deadlines. And so one of the first ones that we wanted to talk about was rolling admissions. And this type of admission deadline means that whatever college or university using this will accept applications until that program fills up. And knowing the nature of rolling admissions, because they are not necessarily a fixed timeline, the decisions for these admissions can stretch out into the summer sometimes. But a lot of these decisions still do come out around the same time as others in April. If you do need a bit more flexibility or time with applying, and the school you're interested in is offering rolling admission, this may be a good deadline for you to consider. With that being said, though, it's important that you make sure that you still try as much as possible to apply as early as you can, because programs do fill up fast, and you want to make sure that you give yourself a good chance to secure a spot in terms of having your application considered for admission. The second type of application deadline we want to talk about is open admissions or open enrollment. And basically, this type of admission means that anyone who meets that certain college or university's requirements is able to apply and receive admission. And this type of application is meant to be uncompetitive. It's not going to pit certain students against one another based on their statistics or their accolades or achievements. Simply anybody who meets those requirements is able to enroll, is able to be admitted. And although most community colleges are usually open admissions, there are some private or public institutions sprinkled throughout the United States that do use open admissions as well. And oftentimes you may be able to save money by using attending open admissions colleges or universities. But no matter what, we do want to remind you that you can definitely accomplish your academic and professional goals at any college. And open admissions is just another one of those application types that can be helpful for certain people. And it's all about understanding the type of application deadline that works best for you. The third application deadline we wanted to speak on is regular admission or regular decisions. And this type of admission is all in the name. This is the regular time period that many students here in the United States and even international students as well apply during. And students will apply usually around the end of December, where we'll have those deadlines for the applications be at the start of January. And these decisions come out around April. Regular decision is a non-binding deadline. And what non-binding deadlines mean are that you can apply to other universities as well, so long as the decisions that you're applying for at other universities aren't binding. This is a very solid option to go for. And many students use this option as, it is non-binding, as we mentioned, and it's easy to choose between the universities that you'd like to attend, especially if the schools that you may be applying to on regular decision are safety schools, which mean that these schools aren't your first priority, but they are schools that you would be interested in attending if you don't get into some of the schools that are higher on your list. Next slide, please. The next admissions type or application type that we wanted to talk about was early action. And like the early decision that we'll talk about next, it's very easy to get those two mixed up. But this type of admission is non-binding, just like regular admissions is. And students will submit applications around November and then get a decision by December, which is part of why this is called early action. Decisions and applications happen a bit earlier than regular admissions. And you can apply to other schools on early action unless they are the other form of early action, which ends up being single choice or restrictive early action. And those schools that you apply to with single choice means that you can only apply to these schools early action. But if you want to apply to any other ones, you must do so on regular admissions or another type, except for early decision. And moving into early decision, this type of admission, it has the same time frame for applying and receiving decisions as early action does. But the difference between this and early action is that this decision is binding. And this means that by applying to a college or university on this deadline, you're committing to attend that school. And if you're accepted into the school on early decision, you must withdraw your application from the other schools you've applied to. If you aren't sure that any of the schools you've applied to are your number one, meaning that if you did get accepted to any of those schools, you'd go for certain, it may not be the best choice to apply early decision. But there are some schools that offer multiple rounds of early decision. Usually it goes up to 2. And we strongly recommend that you only apply early decision if you're sure that that college you are interested in is your first choice, the choice that you would be very dedicated to attending if you were to be accepted. So now that we've covered a bit of the application types, I will hand it over to Jack to talk about letters of recommendation. Yeah.
So we here at we interns have talked about letters of recommendation fairly recently, so I won't go too in depth on this, but the general things to know are that you should start the process early. You want to give the people recommending you plenty of time. These letters are generally, 1.5 pages single spaced, and sometimes they have to write quite a few. So be considerate to the people who you're asking to write for you. Ask early. Give them the information and deadlines that they need to follow. If you're applying early, decision to a school, you will need to ask and get your essays in earlier. Perhaps they don't know how the portal for it works. I believe generally you send like official requests for recommendations through the application portals. So help them with that if necessary. Remind them that you asked, like ask in person, I would recommend, or over Zoom, I guess would be the case at this point. Try and, ask, vocally if you can. If not, I don't think it's the end of the world, but it's, more official and more polite if possible. But after that, after you ask, you will probably want to send an email thanking them for agreeing to and reminding them of the information, because they don't want to have, you don't want to make them keep dates in their head. It can be, a lot of trouble. And you want to make the process as easy for them as you can, just out of consideration and because, it will, make them more happy to write a recommendation for you. Make sure that you get confirmation that it is turned in and submitted. I believe you will do this through the application portal or perhaps through a college counselor if you have one at your school. Yeah, you want to start early once again, so that if you don't have confirmation if you don't have confirmation, you can, after a while, you can get in touch with the teacher and not, kind of scramble on the last day. Thank these people, of course. Thank them again after it has been submitted, and maybe it's overkill, but after you get into an institution, I would also thank them again, because more likely than not, they, were instrumental in it. I've been told that letters of recommendation are very important in the college admissions process. There are some, larger schools, I believe, that, don't focus quite as much on essays, but that do very much care about letters of recommendation. I'm not quite sure how true that is, but that's what I've been told. So, try and be as considerate as possible to your recommenders and be organized in this process. Last, and I put this last not because it's the last thing to do, I think, but because it's, a concrete, important step that can't be forgotten. So I thought I'd finish on it. Make sure to waive your Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act rights. I believe that those rights are generally that you can see what you can see your educational documentation upon request, but universities do not really care about recommendations that the students have been allowed to see. They want recommendations that the teachers wrote candidly without the students, being able to see them. So you want to waive your right to see this particular document before you send it in. You will never see the letters in all likelihood unless FERPA is overturned or something like that. Maybe if the university, shuts down or changes, but, really let it go. It's not the end of the world if people agree to write a recommendation for you. I'm sure what they're saying is very positive, so just take that to heart. I will be handing it back to Megan now, I believe.
Yeah, thank you. Something that we talked about a little bit during the Common application and the Coalition application that is important is knowing your deadlines. And so it's extremely important while completing the application to know your deadlines, and each school will have their own deadline for when their application is due, regardless of the application type you use, so Apply Texas Coalition, Common application, or the California application. So just keeping in mind that every school is different and you need to know these applications. And a lot of this is dependent upon the type of application process you use. So if you're going to do decision 1, decision 2, early action, regular decision. So just keeping track of your applications and when they're due, because it's really important. And then just some tips for completing the application. So do you mind switching to the next slide? Thank you. So first, start your research early, and it's always important and better to be prepared and to take your time and really understand which universities and colleges will be the best fit for you. There are over 4,000 undergraduate institutions in the United States, and so it can be a little daunting and overwhelming when you're first starting that research. So by giving yourself time to really find those schools and weed out the ones that are good for you, you allow yourself the best opportunity to find the best place for you. The benefit of there being so many schools is that you have the opportunity to find the school that fits you just right. And there's also multiple scholarship opportunities because there are so many schools. So just keeping in mind the individual scholarships at each school, as well as the general scholarships and all the different places that you can apply to. And if you would like, we speak about the best ways on starting this research process in our first Instagram live session, which can be found on our Instagram page at EducationUSA MX. And so that's our first Instagram live where we talk about the research that goes into looking at different schools and finding the ones that you should be applying to. And other tips for this process. And so once you've narrowed it down to the schools that you want to apply to, finding the best application process for those schools. So if majority of those schools are accepted through the Common application or the Coalition application, or you're applying to schools in Texas, just making sure that you know and understand the different application processes that are available and the best one for the schools that you are applying to. Another important thing to note for international students especially is that when you're applying and when you want to apply for these undergraduate institutions, many of them require you to either take the TOEFL, the IELTS, or the Duolingo proficiency tests. And so you'll have to give them these test scores in order to apply and show your proficiency in English for many of these undergraduate institutions. And so it's important that you understand that which schools you're applying to need these and require these, as well as taking them with enough time so that you can give these scores to the institutions that you want to apply to. Something to keep in mind is that some schools might accept a certain score on the verbal section of the SAT or ACT as proof of your English proficiency. So just making sure that maybe you took that, got that score that is required, so you don't need to take the other test. So keeping that in mind and doing that research. So what is the TOEFL? The TOEFL is the test of English as a foreign language. And so it's a English proficiency test that measures the ability of non-native English speakers for their English language use. And so it's 4 parts. And so that's read, your reading, your written, your hearing, and your spoken. So there's 4 sections to this test, and it's taken on a computer and at a secure testing center. And because of its structure, it usually takes about 3 hours to complete. But once you take this test, you'll be able to send those scores to the universities and colleges that require it, and you'll be able to apply to those universities. So it's important to understand when those tests are available and offered, and how to take them, and which universities you want to apply to require them. And so just keeping all that in mind. But now I'm going to hand it over to Manny so he can tell us about the other tests that are offered.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us some of those tips and a few of those tests that are important to have on our in terms of applications. The other tests that certain universities and colleges will require are the IELTS test, or the International English Language Testing System. Just like the TOEFL, you'll be tested on listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And there are 2 different versions of this test available. But since we assume that you're applying for college in the US for undergraduate study, the IELTS academic test is the one that you would take. And this version of the test is more focused on the academic language you will most likely be getting used to using in college or university. And all of these sections of the test are completed on the same day. The speaking test, however, can be completed up to a week, or a week before or after the other tests that are a part of the IELTS exam. And you can choose to take the test on paper or computer. The only difference, of course, will be that you will, be writing your answers and responses on paper if you choose the paper test. And the computer test, you'll be typing out your answers. Also, the paper-based test will be face-to-face for the entirety of the exam. But the only portion of the test that is face-to-face for both will be the speaking portion. And with the computer-based test, you'll have more test dates to choose from, and your results will be available in 5 to 7 days for the test that you take. And there are plenty of practice tests and materials that are out there to help you prepare for the test as well. The Duolingo English proficiency test is considered a more modern proficiency assessment for international students. And it doesn't require you to register beforehand or set up a time appointment like the other tests that we mentioned do. This test takes under an hour to complete, and your results can be certified within 2 days. The test uses computer technology that adapts the questions to the difficulty that is right for each person taking the test. And there is a writing sample and video interview that the schools you apply to will have sent to them along with your score. And there are hundreds of universities and secondary schools that accept this test. I know for a fact that the University of Chicago that we all go to accepts this test. And there are other schools like Johns Hopkins or Duke that you might have heard of. These schools also accept this test. Another important thing to make sure that you have lined up when you're applying for universities or colleges in the US is your citizenship or visa status. You'll be asked to indicate your status, and if there is necessary paperwork to be completed, if you need to apply for a visa to the United States, make sure that the necessary steps for those are taken, and that you complete it once you've been accepted into a US university. The most common one for international students is the F1, and this is because that one is more specific for students that are applying to schools in the US for an academic degree. And again, as Megan mentioned earlier, if you've taken the SAT or the ACT, some schools will waive your English proficiency requirement for a specific score on either one of those tests. So make sure that you report those scores as well. And another interesting and important thing to keep in mind is that many colleges and universities, as of late, are making the ACT and SAT scores optional in response to everything that's been happening with the COVID-19 pandemic. So while we do strongly encourage you to take these tests if possible, it's also important that you make sure that you consider the health of yourself and those around you, and that if you aren't able to have safe and easy access to taking these tests, that you don't feel obligated to, but that you make sure that every other part of your application that you are working on is done to the best of your ability, so that you can still have a good chance of being accepted to the schools that you've applied to. But all of the information that we've given today, that concludes our webinar on the application process for undergraduate institutions here in the United States. We'd like to take some time to talk a little bit about some of the online events that will be happening soon. I believe the first one we want to talk about is our next Instagram Live. And this will be covering resumes and extracurricular activities. We will talk a little bit about how to craft a college resume and some of the extracurricular activities you may want to include on your applications that we talked about today. These are very, very important parts of the application process, and doing well in including these can help give institutions a good idea and a more broad idea of the type of candidate you are and how well you'll fit into their university. The second thing we want to talk about is another webinar, and we'll be talking about students' perspectives on living the college experience. And we will be sharing a lot about what it's like living on campus, or what it's like sitting in the classroom, or what it may be like to join different groups on campus and be involved in the campus community. We want to make sure that we help you all kind of get a good idea and a good picture of college life in the US, and how all of those things may impact you, and different ways that you can get involved on campus. And lastly, we just want to let you know about the EducationUSA virtual fair that will be happening this year. Here at the virtual fair, you will be able to chat with many different representatives from 100 different institutions, and you'll be able to contact EducationUSA advisors and attend webinars that will give you a lot more information about applying for college and other important information that you will need for studying in the US and making the most of those opportunities. And you can find out more using the bit.ly link that we've attached to the flyer, and as well as in the slide, bit.ly/EduSA Fair. And this event will be taking place on the 19th of September. So mark your calendars for that, and stay on the lookout. But yes, thank you all for coming to our webinar. This is the point of the webinar where if you have any questions, we'd like to make sure we can address those if there are any. But please do talk to an Education USA Advising Center if you have any further questions. We're here to help, and we'd like to make sure you have all the information that you need. But I'll turn it over to Martha to answer any questions anyone might have had.
Thank you, Manny. Yeah, here is a question for you guys. The question is if they can have or use two platforms at the same time, meaning that if they can create two profiles in different platforms, for instance, one in Common App and another one with Coalition. Is this possible?
Yeah, so I believe it is definitely possible to create profiles for each of these services. However, if you are going to do so, it will be wise to make sure that you are not submitting more than one application to any schools that overlap. There are certain schools on the Coalition application that also accept applications used from the Common Application service. And so it's very important to make sure that if there are certain schools that you're interested in that you want to apply to, that you don't use both platforms to apply. Make sure that you use the one that you are most comfortable using to apply to those schools. The only case you would probably want to use multiple is if there are certain institutions on the Coalition application that if there are certain institutions that aren't accepting the Coalition application, and the Common application does include those schools. So yes, it is possible to use those two different platforms, but you have to make sure that you aren't applying to the same school twice, if that makes sense.
Okay, perfect, Manny, thank you. Another question, how long do you recommend to prepare a good and complete application for admission in Common App or Coalition?
Yeah, I think this is dependent upon each person and the amount of schools that you're applying to, but for the Common application specifically, I know that it opens in the beginning of August. So just as soon as it opens, I recommend you just, and when you want to apply for university, whether it be this year or next year or whatever year, just putting in that general information, because it is basic information just about you and your family and stuff, but sometimes it can be a little time consuming. So just getting that out of the way and just starting those essays as soon as possible, because even if you finish them early, it's better to finish them early and really give yourself time to read over them and think about what you want to say and plan out these essays instead of being rushed at the end and kind of having that stress. So just giving yourself that time and starting as soon as you can will be the best thing, I think, for you.
Perfect, thank you, Megan. Another question, I don't know when exactly my teacher needs to upload my recommendation letter or his recommendation letter within my profile in Common App.
Generally by the application date, correct? I mean, by the deadline, correct?
So for each school, they have different requirements for when those letters of recommendation are due. So you just need to know research for every school that you are applying to, what the deadline is, and making sure that your teacher knows and is informed. And usually once you put them down as a recommender, they'll get an email with all the information they need, but just making sure that you are telling them when it needs to be done. So it's very clear so you don't miss that, they don't miss the deadline for writing those letters of recommendation.
Perfect. Another question. And then the professor who will be sending the recommendation letter needs to sign the paper and scan it and send it, or is it an online format in order to send these recommendation letters through the platforms, for instance, Common App?
Online format, I believe.
Okay. Another question for you guys. Which application did you guys use when you applied for your university, and why?
I used the Common application because all of the schools that I was applying to accepted the Common application. So for me, that was the easiest platform, but it is dependent upon the schools that you are going to apply to.
Okay. Jack and Manny, would you like to talk about your experience as well for this question?
Yeah, I use the Common application on recommendation from a counselor, and I also use the University of California system application to apply to a few University of California schools.
Perfect.
Yes,
and
yes. I also personally used the Common application, although I did have a brief period where I did consider using the Coalition application. Like Megan mentioned, all of the schools that I was interested in applying to accepted the Common application, and so that was the much easier choice for me to use for applying to colleges. So yes, it's all about the different schools that you're interested in applying to, and knowing which application services that they accept.
Perfect. Yeah, another question. So the application fee will be paid through the application for each university?
Yes, so when you apply to each different university, some of them will take you to a different page on their application where you can then submit a payment for the application fee. But as Megan mentioned before, if you do happen to have your application fee waiver approved, those fees are ones you will not have to worry about. So yes, through the application, you will be able to submit a payment if the school does have one for applying to their program.
Perfect. Well, on this side, there is no more question. I don't know if you got any questions within your chats. Yeah.
I don't believe so, no. So yeah, if anyone does have any more questions or would like to get in touch with the different advising centers that we are interning at, we have information for our social media accounts and contact information as well. Like we mentioned before, be sure to head over to our EducationUSA MX Instagram page to get some more information from our Instagram live sessions, as well as to stay updated on some of the different events that will be happening. And if you do have questions further, please direct those to the email addresses you see on the screen, Mexico City at educationusa.org if you are closest to the Mexico City Advising Center, and M. Martinez at educationusa.org if you are closer to the Guadalajara Advising Center. But other than that, thank you all for coming to today's webinar. If you want to learn a little bit more about Education USA, the website is here as well, educationusa.state.gov. And we hope to see you again very soon. Yes, thank you again for attending the webinar, and we hope today's session was very helpful and very informative. So yes, thank you all for coming.
For sure, it was very valuable, your information and your perspective. Thank you again, guys, and thank you to Manny, Jack, and Megan, and to everyone. So looking forward to see everyone virtually in the next webinar that is interesting for you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thanks for joining us today.